They don't come at you with fists. They come with smiles, with silence, with just enough flattery to make you ignore the shiver in your gut. Manipulation is not loud. It's patient, precise. It wraps itself in friendship, in loyalty, in love. It learns your wounds and uses them as entry points. You don't even realize it's happening until something inside you starts to dim. You say yes when you mean no. You apologize for things that aren't yours. You start shrinking to fit into someone else's story. This is how power gets stolen, not in battle, but in small, invisible compromises. And here's the truth they never want you to see. Once you recognize the game, you can choose not to play. This video is your awakening, a deep dive into the psychology of manipulation, the tactics they use, and the defenses you never knew you had. We're pulling back the curtain, exposing the script, and giving the pen back to you. Welcome to your turning point. Let's begin. They don't control your actions, they control your emotions. Because once they own how you feel, they can write the rest of the story. The most dangerous form of control doesn't come through domination. It comes through influence, quiet, invisible, and almost always cloaked in concern. They trigger fear to make you hesitate. They use guilt to keep you compliant. They dangle approval to keep you close, so that when they pull, you move, not because you want to, but because you've been emotionally conditioned not to resist. Think about it. How many times have you said yes just to avoid conflict? Laughed when something hurt you? Apologized when you were the one betrayed? That's not kindness. That's a system, engineered from your deepest insecurities. And they know how to work it, because manipulation doesn't need a raised voice. All it needs is a moment of emotional confusion, a pause, a flinch, a crack in your clarity. That's when the hook goes in. And here's the twist. They're not always conscious of it. Sometimes manipulation is inherited, passed down. The child who had to perform for love becomes the adult who pressures others to do the same. But whether it's deliberate or conditioned, the effect is the same. You're no longer acting from your own truth. You're reacting from theirs. And if you don't catch it early, you'll begin to doubt your own instincts. You'll start asking permission to be yourself. And that is the death of freedom. But here's the shift. Once you become aware of the emotional levers being used on you, you can stop being pulled by them. Start asking questions mid-trigger. When you feel rushed, ask why. When you feel guilt, ask whose voice that really is. When someone plays victim, look for the hidden power move. Because once you see the strings, you can't unsee them. This is your power. Emotional awareness is the lockpick. It returns you to yourself. And that's the one place manipulators can't reach. Your center. Not all manipulators wear frowns. Some wear perfect smiles. Some don't take your power. They make you give it willingly. There's a type of manipulator that doesn't demand obedience. They don't bark orders. They don't guilt you or threaten to leave. They just shine. They're magnetic, effortless. They speak in riddles and compliments, weaving a web you don't even realize you're stepping into. And before long, you're doing things you'd never do for anyone else. Why? Because charisma is a drug, and most people are addicted to how it makes them feel. Seen, special, chosen. They give you just enough attention to make you chase the next hit, and just enough mystery to make you doubt whether you've earned it. You see, the Pied Piper doesn't need to chase the crowd. He just plays the right tune, and the crowd follows. That tune? It's your unresolved desire to be validated, liked, wanted. It's the echo of every time you felt invisible, now offered a spotlight. But here's the danger. That spotlight isn't real. It's a tool, a lure, and the moment you no longer serve their purpose, it vanishes. Because this kind of charm isn't love, it's leverage. And when your sense of worth depends on someone else's approval, you'll sacrifice authenticity for proximity. You'll abandon truth to stay included. That's how the trap works. They don't manipulate you with force. They manipulate you with your own unhealed longing. But there's a way out. When you recognize that charisma without integrity is a performance, You stop mistaking spotlight for sunlight. You stop confusing admiration for affection. Charisma isn't evil, but when it's used to bend wills, it becomes a weapon. Your job is not to resist charm, it's to see through it. You look past the tone, you're past the smile, past the carefully crafted words. What's the intention? What's the pattern? Because once you stop being dazzled, you start seeing clearly. And when clarity returns, control ends. Now, what happens when that charm starts rewriting your reality? When you begin questioning not just your actions, but your entire version of the truth. That's not charisma anymore. That's narrative control. The most dangerous liar doesn't deny the truth. They distort it, just enough to make you question reality. This is next-level manipulation. Not brute force, not charm, but control of the story. You're no longer just reacting to flattery or pressure. You're reacting to a version of reality that's been carefully edited. This is where the manipulator becomes a screenwriter. And guess what? You're no longer the main character. They rewrite the past, twist your words, reframe your emotions to suit their plotline. Suddenly, you're too sensitive. Overthinking, reading into things. But your instincts? They're screaming. Because deep down, you know something's been altered. You're not crazy, you're being conditioned. And it happens slowly, conversation by conversation. Until you start defending them to yourself. Justifying the gaps. Bending your own memory to keep the peace. That's the game. Make you doubt your perception long enough, and eventually you surrender it. This is gaslighting, but it's more than that. It's a total narrative hijack. They play the victim, you become the villain, and any attempt to clarify the truth is seen as drama, attacking, or emotional. It's a trap. And it works because it targets the one thing you depend on to survive, your ability to trust yourself. If they can make you second-guess that, they own the frame. And whoever controls the frame controls the game. So how do you take the script back? You slow the scene down, pause, replay, ask, is this my memory or the version they handed me? When you stop reacting and start reflecting, you disconnect from their narrative grip. Start writing your version. Say what happened, even if they call it a lie. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Because the moment you reclaim your version of the story, you become the narrator again. And the manipulator? They lose the power of confusion. Now, here's the part they really hate. Once their story starts slipping, they escalate. Not with more lies, but with tiny, quiet invasions. They start eroding your boundaries, 1 inch at a time. You don't even notice it until your no becomes negotiable. They don't knock down your walls. They slowly move the line, inch by inch, until you're standing in a place you swore you'd never go. That is the quiet tactic, the one that doesn't cause alarm. Because it doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual, subtle, intentional. First, they test your boundaries. Just a little. A backhanded joke, a request that makes you uncomfortable, a subtle invasion of your time, space, or silence. And when you hesitate, they laugh it off. You're too serious. Relax. I didn't mean it like that. You feel the pressure to prove you're not too much. So you stay silent. You allow it. See and seem was I seen line. And just like that, the line moves. Then they test it again, a bigger ask, a deeper intrusion, a more obvious disregard for what you said you were not okay with. And if you flinch, they flip it back on you. You're overreacting. You're being selfish. Can't you just do this one thing for me? And now the boundary is not just being pushed, it's being turned into a weapon. The message becomes clear. Love means access. Loyalty means surrender. Compassion means self-abandonment. This is how manipulation evolves into control. Because once your no loses power, everything becomes negotiable. Your time, your peace, your body, your identity. And worst of all, they convince you that you are the problem for wanting space, for needing limits, for drawing the line. But here's what they fear most: a boundary held with calm conviction, not with rage, not with explanation, just a quiet, unwavering truth. This is where I end, and you don't get to cross it. Because boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. You decide who walks through. You decide what stays out. And when you enforce them, manipulators have only two options: respect you or reveal themselves. And when they reveal themselves, the mask slips. That's when you see who they really are. Who they really are, and how deeply they've tried to blur the edges of your soul. But what happens when they stop pushing boundaries, look at and they're found, and start merging with you entirely? When their identity, their pain, their moods become your responsibility. That's not just manipulation, that's emotional possession. At first, it feels like deep connection, but slowly it starts to feel like suffocation. Because you're no longer sure where you end and where they begin. This is the most intimate kind of manipulation, not domination, not flattery, not even control of your story. This is the invasion of your emotional self. They don't demand power, they dissolve the separation. They say things like, "We're the same. I can't live without you. No one understands me like you do." It sounds romantic. It sounds spiritual. It sounds like soul bonding. Until your needs disappear inside their moods. Suddenly, when they're upset, you're on high alert. When they feel lonely, you feel responsible. When they're in pain, you feel guilty for not fixing it. That's not love. That's emotional merging, and it's a slow erasure of self. Here's the truth. Connection doesn't require sacrifice of identity, but enmeshment does. It creates a relationship where your worth is measured by how well you carry their pain. And if you set a boundary, they say you're abandoning them. They say you're heartless. They spiral just to pull you back into the storm. Because the moment you step back to breathe, and they panic. Why? Because your independence threatens their illusion of fusion. They don't want a partner. They want an extension of themselves. They call it closeness. But what they really mean is control through vulnerability. Not yours, theirs. And the hook? You feel needed. And being needed feels powerful. It makes you feel important. But don't confuse being needed with being valued. Because love doesn't erase, love empowers. Love recognizes difference and celebrates it. Enmeshment is not intimacy. It's emotional colonization. And healing begins when you name it. Ask yourself, is this empathy or entrapment? Is this closeness or codependency? And most importantly, can I say no without being punished? Because if your no leads to guilt, chaos, or emotional collapse, and you're not in a relationship, you're in a cage. And to escape, you must return to the one place they've tried to disconnect you from, yourself. When the world inside you is empty, anyone can move in. But when it's fortified, no one enters without permission. You've been torn down slowly, gaslit, guilt-tripped, pushed past your limits, pulled into their chaos. But now, it's time to reclaim the territory of your soul. This isn't about fighting them anymore. This is about rebuilding you, brick by brick, truth by truth, because healing doesn't start with revenge. It starts with foundation. And that foundation is self. Not the version of you that adapted to survive. Not the pleaser, not the performer, not the echo of someone else's needs. The real you, the one buried under years of noise. The one who whispered no when your mouth said yes. The one who knew but didn't yet believe. That version of you, they're not gone. They've just been waiting. Now it's time to let them lead. So how do you begin? You stop asking for permission. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop negotiating your intuition for the sake of peace. Instead, you build your inner fortress, not made of stone, but of self-awareness, of inner stillness, of unshakable values. This fortress isn't about isolation, it's about discernment. Because when you know who you are, you stop being manipulated by who they want you to be. When your identity is rooted, no storm can rip it loose. You create rituals of return, silence, prayer, reflection, journaling. You listen, not to the noise outside, but the voice within. And each time you choose you lay another brick. Each time you say no with calm authority, you reinforce the gate. Each time you walk away from what dishonors your soul, you raise the walls. And this fortress, it doesn't trap you. It protects your peace. It holds your standards. It guards your energy. It filters out the chaos that once owned your mind. This isn't about becoming hard. It's about becoming whole, because healing isn't weakness, it's war. And the greatest rebellion is to become fully yourself in a world that tried to fracture you. There comes a moment when silence becomes betrayal. Not to them, but to yourself. You've rebuilt. You've remembered who you are. And now, the mirror turns. Because healing is not complete until the truth is spoken. Not whispered in a journal. Not processed in silence. But declared to the very face that once distorted you. This is the moment we fear. The confrontation. But not because we're weak. We fear it because it demands everything. Clarity, composure, courage. You're not just confronting them. You're confronting the version of you that tolerated the lies. And when they look at you, they'll expect the old rhythm. The dance where you apologize for bleeding. The script where they gaslight and you question your sanity. But this time, you don't flinch. You don't yell. You don't over-explain. You don't spiral into justification. You speak truth, clear and clean. That was manipulation. That crossed my boundary. I will not carry your emotions anymore. And when they push back, because they will, you don't collapse. You don't fold into guilt or fear. You stand. Because confrontation isn't about changing them. It's about liberating you. You're not looking for an apology. You're not hoping they finally get it. You're not here for closure. They don't hold that power anymore. You're here to be seen. To echo what your younger self couldn't say back then. To draw a line, not in sand, but in stone. And if they rage, let them. If they cry, manipulate, twist, let them. Because their chaos is no longer your responsibility. You are not obligated to carry their inability to self-reflect. What matters is this. You showed up with truth. You protected your boundary. You honored your voice. That is victory. That is freedom. And sometimes, the real confrontation happens in your own soul. Finally admitting what happened. Owning the depth of the betrayal. Grieving what you gave away, without shaming yourself for it. That grief is sacred, and it's the gateway to true release. Because after the confrontation comes the exhale. A life without walking on eggshells. A mind no longer haunted by old scripts. You came here searching for answers, and instead you found yourself. Not the mask, not the version they shaped, but the one that's been quietly waiting beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion of being who you were expected to be. And now, you see it. You were never broken. You were just buried, buried under survival, buried under roles, buried under the weight of everyone else's needs. But piece by piece, shadow by shadow, truth by truth, you've returned. You've stood face to face with manipulation. You've torn off the mask of the persona. You've made space for your rage, your grief, your voice. And now, you no longer abandon yourself to be loved. You no longer shrink to keep the peace. Because what you've built inside, it's unshakable. A soul that knows its name. A heart that knows its value. A mind that no longer seeks approval to exist. You are no longer led by fear, but by clarity. No longer driven by validation, but by vision. You've awakened from the lie that said you had to earn love by betraying yourself. The lie that said your worth was based on how small you could make yourself for others. That spell is broken now, because when you see clearly, you don't just change your life, you change your legacy. This isn't just healing. This is resurrection, a return to the sacred fire within you, a return to the kingdom of self, a return to the Creator's voice that's been whispering through every wound. You were never meant to live asleep, and now you won't, because this is the awakening, the quiet revolution where the soul remembers, where power doesn't come from control, but from inner alignment. And as you walk forward, you carry something no one can take from you, the truth, the strength, the self. This isn't the end of the journey. This is the beginning of everything. If this message struck a chord, don't just scroll away. Comment your thoughts below, share your insights, start the dialogue. And if you're ready to build your inner citadel, to master the mind, the moment, and yourself, then subscribe now. This is more than content, it's a calling. Welcome to the Inner Citadel.